So welcome, everybody. My name is Lisa Shala, and I'm the Director of Connecting Communities in the Americas. This is an initiative that began about 5 years ago between community foundations, primarily in the United States and Mexico, and that today includes foundations from across the Americas, Argentina and Chile, all the way up to Nunavut, Canada, where we have somebody joining us today. So we're really excited to have you here today. This is a chance for you to really learn from each other, meet each other, and I encourage you to write to each other in the chat, follow up with this call, make contact with each other. You'll receive their emails in a follow-up message from me. But really take advantage of this space to build relationships across countries. So the two people who are joining us today are ones that I have had the honor and privilege of getting to know a little bit over the past couple of years. And they're just going to share with us kind of what their paths have been to growth of their foundation, but they don't necessarily have the same definition of what growth means. So we're going to start today just by thinking a little bit about what our definition of growth is. So I've asked you in the chat if you could please put your organization and your country. And we'll be using interpretation in Spanish and Portuguese today. You can use the button for interpretation and then click on the language of your choice. So puedes ir al idioma que tú quieres escuchar, si sea español o portugués. Also in the chat, could we take a couple of minutes, and I would love to know your ideas that you're coming in with today. What is your organization's measurement for growth? In other words, when you think of the word growth, foundation growth, what are you thinking about? And if you can just put those words in the chat. We'll take a couple of minutes to do that. How do you measure growth, or what do you think of when you're thinking of growth? Welcome, Lori. I'm so glad you could join us today for the first time. So we're writing our own ideas about what growth means to us. What are we measuring for growth? What are we thinking about when we talk about growth? Corinne, I'm interested in knowing what you're thinking about when you write sustainability. What does that mean for you?
I mean, how can we assure that our organization is growing, but is able to maintain that growth in the future?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's more like on a larger scale and thinking about like 5 years ahead of us.
Good. I've thought a lot about COVID and how for many organizations, there was kind of a rush of donations to organizations to help with COVID. And even like in the United States, there were all of these federal programs that helped to pay for COVID for the organizations. And now that's getting less and less. And so that's a question of sustainability. We had very large growth, but then it's gone down again. So how do we build something that is more consistent? Very good. So we have several good ideas here. Growing the capacity of our team, capacity to create and deliver positive impact, capacity building with nonprofits, sustainability on different levels, making it long-term, reach. Okay, so growing in reach, like either how broad, if we're wanting to grow geographically. It could also possibly mean different populations within the community. Increase public awareness, great, about who we are and how we can help. Organizational capacities, staffing, funding, grant funding as well. Yeah. Good, thank you. And I will include these when we follow up. I have a question. Do you see my chat? I have my chat window open. Do you see that? No, good. Okay, I've always wondered that. So we're really excited to welcome two people today. They're both executive directors of their smaller community foundations. Danielle Gibbie is from a fairly new community foundation in the northernmost territory of Canada. And we have been in touch over the last year or so, and they've had just a really interesting approach to how they want their foundation to function and how they're going about doing that. And then Karl Pratt, I've met, we're both on the board of the Kansas Association for Community Foundations. And I had the opportunity to just chat with him and learn so much about what it's like going from a very small volunteer-led community foundation that is responsible for a county in rural Kansas to being able to have their own executive director today, and what his vision or their vision is to keep that growing. So we're going to begin with Karl. And Karl, you'll just need to let me know how to move on here from slide to slide. I do have one question. Is the Spanish interpretation working for everybody? Can somebody give me a fingers up or down, thumbs up or down? It's working? Okay, great. Okay, so go ahead, Karl.
Okay, well, thank you, Lisa, and thank you everybody for joining today. It's my pleasure to be here with you all virtually. And I'm so honored again to have been asked by Lisa to share a little bit about myself and our organization out here in rural Kansas. So with that, we'll get started. Lisa, you can go on to the next slide. So I just kind of wanted to start with first several slides. We were kind of laughing earlier, Danielle and I, about our presentations and, providing kind of a visual reference. I'm definitely a visual person. So I'm kind of going to start with the bird's eye, or I guess I should say maybe the astronaut's view of where I'm located. But I am in the state of Kansas, which is the central state within the United States. I always like to say the heart of Kansas and truly the Midwest area. But Kansas is like I say, it's the central state, and then you can see that red dot there. You don't even see my town's name yet because we are a bit small, but I am located within Sheridan County, and you can go on to the next one as well.
Okay, and just a reminder, Karl, slow down a
Yes,
little
thank you. I apologize.
for the
I am a very fast speaker, so yes, I will do better to slow down. Thank you for the reminder. So Sheridan County, we are within Kansas, there are 105 different counties, and we are located in Northwest Kansas. We like to call it the magic corner of Kansas, and I'll kind of talk a little bit more about that later. But Kansas's population, as you can see, is just shy of about 3 million. And we'll drill down even further here. And then little Sheridan County, we are a population of about 2,400 residents, holding strong at that rate. And within my county, we have several smaller communities. Hoxie is the main community, and that is where I reside and hold my office. They are kind of in the middle of the county. And then up in the north, or the kind of top left corner, is Selden, which is the next largest city in our county, of just a little under 200 people. Hoxie itself has about 1,200. Selden has just shy of 200. And then we do have 3 additional townships within our county. There's no major economic businesses to speak of aside from some agrarian farmers, that kind of stuff. But we do have those communities that historically were incorporated as cities, but their populations are not large enough size anymore for that. I did just include a few demographics as well. They're on the right, just to show you again, population, median age. We are, a kind of middle-aged community, an aging community. But I am pleased to say, I don't have the actual statistics, but there are a lot of youth that are returning to Hoxie and growing families, which is very exciting. And so we're staying steady at keeping our population going and our communities alive. You can go on to the next slide. And then just a couple other slides just to give you another visual of kind of who we are and what we're about. We are a small community, we're a small county, but we have a wonderful quality of life where I live. And we have opportunities that are available to us that are in the big cities because we make them happen. We're not waiting on other people to come around to do that. And the foundation, of course, has been instrumental in improving the quality of life and bettering the communities for everybody within. Again, we're a very agrarian, rural-based community. We have farmers and cattle producers, different livestock as well, relied on that. I'm an arts and music person myself, so I did want to include that top left photo of a summer production of the musical Frozen that we did last summer. And I'm actually gearing up to do this summer. We have a friend and I run an organization, and we've got a 6-town, 6-show theater festival we do out here in Northwest Kansas. So
Wow.
the arts are alive, but we make the opportunities happen. You can go on to the next slide. And then again, just a few more photos to give you a flavor of who we are. We have a wonderful swimming pool. We have a lot of the amenities that the cities have, but they're on our scale and at our pace. Okay, so our foundation, our mission, you can read it there, but we are here, of course, to help and encourage donors to create charitable funds with us and/or create additional resources by other means that will improve and contribute to the quality of life in Sheridan County residents now and in the future. And that in the future, of course, is a big component of who we are and who we want to be, utilizing the power of endowment, which I'm sure many are familiar with. But that idea of that, yes, we want to do things today, but we also need to plant the seeds for tomorrow. And so we can go forward with that. And then also us as an actual organization, we are what's called an affiliate. We're an affiliate or child foundation is kind of how I like to verbalize it, of a parent foundation. And for us, that parent foundation then is the organization that holds the IRS's tax exempt in the United States 501c3 public charity status, allowing us the benefits of donors, of course, making donations to us, them getting tax benefits from that, and then us being able to grant out organizations to various public charities with that similar designation in support of their missions. You can go on to the next slide. And then furthermore, just kind of laying out that aspect of an affiliate model. What is wonderful is because we did start as a volunteer organization, didn't have staff for many, many years, and quite frankly, not a lot of activity. However, once we became affiliated with Greater Northwest Kansas Community Foundation, and they're our parent foundation based about 2 hours away from us, actually, further northwest here in Kansas, in the magic corner of Kansas. But they are the organization, the parent organization that then has the staffing and capacity to do a lot of the back end work that we just quite frankly don't have the ability to do. Initially, it was the knowledge, the expertise, but then the actual channels and funding, different aspects of needing the bookkeeping done, the investments, all of that kind of stuff, the grant management. So what's wonderful about our situation is, again, it allows us as a local organization, a local board of directors, and then myself as the sole staff member to do, of course, the day-to-day work, to build the relationships, to create the opportunities, the partnerships here locally, but have that back end office support that's handling the financials, handling all of those different components. So I'm just going to go through several slides to kind of give you an idea of our evolution. So our organization itself was created back in the early 2000s by a local economic development director who worked for the city and county here, and they created the foundation. They did get their own 501c3 status and maintained that as a public organization for quite a while, but they struggled to get organized and educated. I just recently was going through some old notebooks of meeting minutes, and it was minutes of, okay, so-and-so showed up, but so-and-so didn't show up and no work was done, and they didn't quite know what they were doing, but they were able to reach out and get some education from nearby foundation that was also relatively new. And of course, at that time out here in Northwest Kansas, community foundations were certainly a new concept. And so people were trying to figure it out, but that also lends itself to kind of that pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, and we will create what we need and what we want. And so they did go after it. So they planted the seeds, creating the organization. They had some struggles, but they did start to find some success in being an organization that could work on special projects for the betterment of the community, acting as a pass-through or fiscal agent to help with some community improvement projects, which included the development of a wellness center that's now housed in the basement of our hospital, and some other projects within the community. You can go on to the next one. And then when we did become an affiliate of Greater Northwest Kansas Community Foundation in 2012, everything started to change shortly thereafter. The board, of course, was still voluntary led. It was made up of different business leaders, community leaders, and those that had the love and foresight to look ahead and see what could be done to make things better. With that affiliation, as I mentioned, started to provide the back-end office resources to help out that board as well with handling donations, handling tax receipts, that kind of things. So again, the board could start laying the groundwork for the relationship development, which, as we know, is so important for all of our organizations. We're about people. People are who we are, who we need to be with. And so that was the ability for them to really start laying that groundwork. Then a couple of years later, we have the very distinct fortune of having a local private foundation that is based in our region. And they started to see what we were all trying to do and how they could step in and help us advance us, quite frankly, help us grow to the next stage and the next stage and the next stage. And so they began laying some additional foundational work for our area community foundations by providing it doesn't quite matter money, but they were providing a pool of money that we as community foundations could then in turn start granting out to our area organizations. And so what this did is it started laying the groundwork for what is a community foundation, what are grants, how do you write a grant application, how do you accept those funds and then complete your project and then do a grant report. So they kind of provided the end goal, which for us, of course, is being able to grant out grants. They provided that first, which was kind of interesting because then from that started the ability to all of those educational components falling into place for the organizations that were applying to us and then for the volunteer board itself as well. A couple years later, after they got communities used to grants, they then added in 2016 a match month campaign opportunity where if communities raised a certain amount of money locally through local donations, they then matched that amount dollar for dollar, and then all of those funds went into the development of a large unrestricted endowment fund for each community. They have been doing that challenge every year since then, and we will still do it until 2029. And the goal of that, of course, is to help all of our foundations out here. And I should say that the Hanson Foundation serves a 26 county, Northwest, North Central geographical region. And that's why we call ourselves the Magic Corner, because we're in the Hanson's Magic Corner of Kansas. But they are helping all of us create that large endowment fund that then we are then going to be able, of course, to grant out as grants to our area organizations and continue to improve the quality of life. So they taught us now how to start fundraising on our own and how to start having those donor discussions and those campaigns within that larger scale, and also helped us to start to think bigger and go after some of those bigger gifts and those bigger amounts. You can go on to the
And I
next.
love that, Carl, about this role of private family foundations. We have a few different examples across the country, and I think there's so much potential for that in other countries as well. And they could use the Hanson Foundation and the Patterson Foundation in Kansas really as an example of how they can support, have such a larger impact in the regions that they're interested in if they supported community foundations in that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, you know, we're so fortunate to have them. And you mentioned Hanson, and then Patterson Family Foundation is another one that's based on the eastern side of the state and very urban Kansas City. However, they are about supporting rural Kansas. And so we kind of get a double dip, which is very exciting. There are some amazing things happening in Kansas right now with all those opportunities. And I always say one of the first things I learned when I took this job on and went to training was community foundations and foundations were primarily limited by our own self-imposed limitations. So for them to see that need, or at least that idea of what that could do and how they have the capacity to help us again kind of grow in all of these different stages, planting the seeds for us to be our own little mini Hanson foundations is kind of what we also say. Hanson will always be there, luckily, but they are helping us really plant the seeds for our own development and growth in our own communities.
Yeah, good.
So we continue on to the end of 2018 when I was hired as the first ever staff person. And I am a Hoxie native. I'm a native of my community, of this county. And I had gone off to college in the mid 2000s and stayed put. I was only about an hour away, but I wasn't connected back home. And the opportunity to come home came about, and this opportunity was created. And so I took advantage of it and thought it'd be a great way to come back to my community, see where it had see what it had become, and then see how I can learn and help it grow further. So I was actually hired just as a part-time position to assist the board. At that time, my position was called board liaison, with the idea that I was assisting the board with the monthly meetings, agendas, minutes, all of kind of that basic clerical work to start with, but then started doing back end marketing, social media, emails, starting to develop those conversations and those relationships further, doing the work of the fundraising, making sure all of the details were getting done, and of course taking some of that load off of the board members who, as we know, are have their day-to-day jobs. My position has evolved over time. Our organization has evolved over time from knowing we had grants, knowing that we were raising money for the future, but we kind of sat over here on the side. We are certainly now in the center. Kansas is in the center of the USA. Our foundation is definitely in the center of our community, and we have become a community leader. And I quite frankly get calls for about any question you could imagine. And my favorite one so far is, can we change the date for Halloween this year? It's on a school night. Well, I didn't quite have an answer for that one, but it's nice that they knew we existed and they thought I was the one to call. So, but again, I've been in my position now since the end of 2018, part-time. I'm in my third year of full-time status as the executive director. I felt confident enough after that point in time to take on that title. And so it's been a great privilege to be with my organization and help continue to grow and take us into the future. So I wanted to kind of include this. This is a great resource that's been shared within Kansas, and I'm sure other foundation areas. But this is one I had picked up from our Kansas Association of Community Foundations conferences at different times. Brian Klontz is a professional financial planner and consultant for foundations, and he kind of laid out this graphic that can show what are operating models for community foundations: donor focused, grant focused, fiscal agents, leadership. Kind of 4 different models you can work in. You can start in one, or you could be thrown into all 4 at the same time. I viewed us, with the work where our foundation had been prior to me and where I've gotten us now, as working in aspects of all 4. But you'll notice with the 3 little stars and the one that's colored in, we kind of started as that fiscal agent. And I think a lot of community foundations, maybe in rural at least, do start with that. They've got the capacity to accept donations. They have the ability then to grant out things and help with projects. So we kind of started in that bottom left box: fiscal agent, short-term pass-throughs, helping with projects. Then we kind of went diagonal up to grant focused when the Hansen Foundation came along to start providing funding for us to then fund out. So we were providing grant funding and then starting to build our own endowment fund that we will grant out of. We've then certainly moved down into leadership, as I say, the last several years. We are the community convener, and we're certainly one of the change agents in our communities, helping create projects, or find the projects, find the people, find the resources, and move forward with those. I'm now working on going a little bit more diagonal to the top left to be more donor focused, because I am a staff of one. And even though I do have the back-end parent support, I do find myself behind my computer screen all the time. However, I have an opportunity this year from the Hansen Foundation in Patterson. They've got a staffing grant, another investment in our foundations, that will allow us all to have full-time foundation directors. Now, I have mentioned that I'm full-time, but I do a mixture of foundation and economic development work. And so I have a mixture of those 2 worlds. They do marry very well, and a lot of projects overlap, but I do that business support, entrepreneurial stuff, while also trying to do the nonprofit support, the donor development. And I just haven't quite had the time to get out and really start developing more of those donor relations, working with donors to develop funds. And so I'm very eager to shift into this new role of foundation only, to really be working with donors and creating those resources and those assets that can benefit our community in the long term and benefit the organizations that will be doing a lot of the work in the community to that end. So you can
Quick
go on to the next one.
question,
Oh, sure.
Carl, some of these you filled the stars in, some not. Is that where you're going now, or what you're leaving, or how much you do of each of these?
So the stars were just a representation of, we started in fiscal agent. That was
Okay.
kind of phase 1. Phase 2 was the 2 stars. Then we kind of stepped more into grants. Phase 3, the 3 stars are, we then became a leader. And then the multiple stars are, that's where we're headed. We'll continue to work in all 4, but I want to focus time and energy over into more of that donor focused donor development
At
model.
this stage now,
Yes.
where you are, yeah. Good.
Absolutely. So, and then using these same kind of models, just to lay out what work have we been doing within them. Donor focused to date has been assisting individuals, of course, in the development of their philanthropic opportunities, primarily through the gifts that they're just giving us for our match month, our different match day campaigns we've done in the past to support organizations, and a couple donor funds that we've developed. Not much beyond that. Grant focused, of course, has been our work. As I mentioned, the Hansen Foundation providing money to us to then grant out. Us also providing educational workshops for our community and organizations to come learn how to write grants, some other convenings of those. Fiscal agent, again, raising money in support of local organizations via match day events we've done in the past, and our own large match month fund that we're creating. And then the leadership, convening the community, identifying projects and problems that we can work to solve together. How have we been able to do this? So when my foundation board, when they decided they did want to create a position, they of course didn't have a lot of resources, but they went to our county and city government and said, hey, we would like to create this position. Can you help us with it? And we'll have this individual look into economic development. And so that's how my position has always been a marriage of the two, because they did provide that opportunity. And quite frankly, it was a very easy ask. Both the county and city said, yes, we would love to help. And they got some startup money to be able to pay me as staff member to do stuff. Did I have a lot of resources beyond that for operations? No, but luckily we of course had the assistance of our parent foundation to help us with those back end things that we were going to need for a while. Then, as we've progressed through, the Hansen Foundation, of course, has been a primary supporter of the growth of all of our foundations by providing operational funding for each of the different programs and initiatives that they've made available to us. So not only did they give us the grant money to grant out, but they provided some operational money to pay for advertising, to pay to hold events, to train the organizations how to write the grants. So they've been providing some back-end office support monetarily for those different components. When it came time for the match month campaigns, again, they provided some operational funding so we could do a large mailing and pay to mail the information out in our campaign. If you reach the match month, not only do you get the money that will go into your fund, they've also provided bonus incentives of additional money, a large chunk that would go into an operating endowment fund. So starting to develop sustainability for us, they provided those funds as well as some additional just immediate operating funding for the immediate needs. So if we were successful, they also gave us a bonus, which was pretty exciting. And we've been able over time to start really growing and develop our operational sustainability through that component too. So again, it's that understanding and that vision of money today, but money tomorrow. Money tomorrow, not only to grant out to organizations, but money to make us be able to stand up on our own feet as an organization, having staff, having the operational funding that we need, of course, to do the work that we do. The foundation, the Patterson Foundation, you can go back real fast, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
So the Patterson Family Foundation similarly has come on board to help with that match month campaign. And the results of that have ended in a pool of money that is unrestricted that we've been able to use for the development of some new funds. But also right now, our greatest need is still operations. And so we've been able to utilize some of that. Our own resources now are coming from administrative fees on our funds. Our parent foundation had, prior to the last 2 years, they had taken the administrative fee solely, of course, to pay for all the work they're doing for us. But they have allowed all of us now to add another small administrative fee onto our own funds that then go into our ongoing operations. And so that was another piece of our ongoing sustainability, is to be able to add that additional fee on all of the funds that we will develop moving forward to help us out. And then finally, additional grants. I love writing grants. Not only do we love receiving grants, but I love writing grants for our organizations, for our communities. And so I have been able to take advantage of a number of opportunities for different projects we've worked on, and different staffing capacities, having some interns available to help throughout the years. So those, of course, are coming from those third-party state grants, other nonprofits. But all of those feed into the piggy banks of the work we're doing. Okay, now you can go on to the next one.
Yeah, the grant writing also helps to get more into the unrestricted piece, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I won't go in detail of this slide, but I just wanted to kind of show you a representation of how these two private foundations in particular, again, stepped in and stepped up and have made us become successful and lead us through our kind of educational journey and through our just growth to start becoming our own mini Hansen foundations, I say. So again, it started, and I don't quite have it all in order, I apologize, but we've had the original grants we were giving out, and then with that, the operational support, the match month campaign, they've added the staffing grants. We've been doing and had a lot of educational resources on planned giving and how we can start having conversations with our donors about leaving estate gifts to our community foundation. They're providing additional back-end support with database. So we've got systems in place to keep track of our donors and our gifts. They're helping us currently work with a marketing consultant to prepare updated marketing materials and a marketing plan for this next year. So lots of different creative ways that they're putting all the puzzle pieces in place for us, that then they will eventually wean us off, but they're really truly getting different components of our life cycle. I kind of feel like we're teenagers right now, but helping us grow up and mature along the way. And then similarly, the Patterson family has helped us with the matching campaign last year and this year. And then they're doing a joint staffing grant currently for our foundation, or for community foundations in Kansas.
Yeah, so just to clarify, these two family foundations are not only helping Karl's foundation, they're really supporting the growth of community foundations in their region and playing such an incredible role in strengthening civil society, therefore. So I see a lot of potential. It could take a while for some family foundations to get this, to understand it, or even corporate foundations, but I think it's a huge just model of what can happen and what impact that can have in a region.
Absolutely. And I will say both of these foundations, of course, they still accept their own grant applications from different organizations, different communities, but they do understand that we as community foundations are on the ground in our communities and have our ear to the rail and are more attuned to the immediate happenings. And so understanding that just aspect of how we can have more, again, immediate impact, they're helping us with all of those resources to have that impact, and then they will still be there to think bigger and broader as well. So just the next two slides, again, I kind of wanted to use that model of community foundations and laying out where I hope that we're headed, what I'm hoping to work on in the next 5 years, so to speak. So again, as I mentioned, I really want to move into the donor-focused box, meeting with donors, getting out of my office, going to their office, taking them to coffee, start discussing opportunities to develop the donor advised funds, scholarship development for post-secondary educations, and getting creative and thinking of scholarships that could help workforce training development. I still have economic development in my head, so trying to get out of the box a little bit on, again, not limiting ourselves to our own limitations. Estate planning, stewarding donors, creating more individual and business partnerships for future matching opportunities. Again, we've been fortunate to have Hanson and Patterson, but they're eventually going to want to put their money elsewhere. So it's an opportunity for us to create our own additional opportunities for such campaigns. Grant focused will continue to take advantage of the Hanson grant opportunity, the pass-through grants as they provide that. But then we are getting ready to open up our own endowment fund. It has grown to a wonderful level, and we're excited to finally say, hey, you all helped us raise this. Let's get it back into the community now. And it is going to be here forever, which is super exciting. Offer grant writing workshops, continue to educate our organizations, and apply for outside grant funding when it becomes available. Partner any resource that we can and have the capacity into to think bigger and go after bigger challenges and bigger opportunities. Next slide. And then again, we'll continue to be fiscal agent with our growing our match month fund, working with the organizations though. My goal is to work with organizations more to help them also build their organizational endowment and sustainability so that they can be around as long as for the future as well, but also maybe some of them will grow to have the capacity to have paid staff too. Pretty much 99% of our organizations are volunteer here, but we all know, I hope, that when you do have a staff person and resources to have a dedicated staff person, you can move the needle. So I hope that we can start helping those organizations grow as well as Hanson has done and Patterson has done for us. And then leadership, I kind of want to be unavoidable. Again, I want to get out of my office, out from behind my desk, my computer screen, and be present and aware, have this logo that's behind me known by every citizen in the community. They know who we are, who they can call when they want to change another holiday, whatever it might be. But I want to be known, but known that we are here to help and we can help and we have the resources that can help. So just listed a couple other things I hope to do on that slide, but that is me, and love to have anyone reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Karl. And we will share these presentations with you. So don't worry that you need to be taking notes furiously, but thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And now we'll go a little bit further north. Go ahead, Lori. Did you have a question? Otherwise, we'll leave the questions, I think, until after Danielle's presentation. So just write them down and take a note of them. Okay, Danielle, bring us up to Nunavut.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. So I'm going to focus my presentation when Lisa and I were chatting about this. She thought it would be really interesting to reflect on our fundraising approach, our strategy to fundraising, and our funding model. So I've kind of structured this presentation in a way that it's one that we might give to potential donors. And then I've included a few slides afterwards that give you a little bit more. So yeah, I'll begin there. Next slide, please. So the red dots, that outlines the territory of Nunavut. So we are 1/5 of Canada's landmass, as you can see. Karl, our community didn't come to us, but Halloween did change this year because of a blizzard warning. So I thought that was kind of a funny similarity. Next slide, please. So this is zoomed in into Nunavut. Our population, according to the last Stats Can census, is approximately 36,000, just shy of 37,000. Over 80% of people living in Nunavut are Inuit, living in 25 municipalities across 3 regions. And we are down here in Iqaluit. If you want to hover over there, Lisa. So we're actually to the right.
There we go.
Yeah. So my husband likes to say this is Iqaluit is on Baffin Island, and my husband likes to say we're in the dog's mouth. And if you imagine an upside down dog, if you can see it there, the tail there. Yeah, you can see it. So there's photos throughout my presentation. Yeah, you can stay here. There's photos throughout that kind of show you life in Nunavut. But I thought it would be important to share that traditionally Inuit were nomadic hunters and gatherers who moved seasonally from camp to camp. A lot of this changed because of colonization and impacts of, forced relocation from the Canadian government. And despite immense changes that have happened in the last generation, Inuit continue to have a strong culture that guides everyday life, close ties to the land, and a dedication to community and a strong sense of self-reliance. When Nunavut was created in 1999, so we're a new territory, we're Canada's youngest jurisdiction. The vision was for a territory where Inuit could thrive. And despite advancements, there's still families in Nunavut that need support to meet basics of life, including safety, housing, food, and as well to uphold cultural identity and language that really defines self-worth and dignity for Inuit. Annauma was created by long-term residents in 2020, and we became a registered charity. That's the Canadian equivalent of a 501c3 in 2022. Over recent years, we've been fundraising, getting the organization organized, and now we're starting to grant out money in a new way that's really attuned to the needs of Nunavut organizations and individuals. Next slide, please. So Annauma focuses on connecting. We want to connect philanthropists, corporate partners, governments, individuals with opportunities to invest through thoughtful action and care. We ask donors to partner with us. And so I want to just leave you thinking about that language and how it might be different from how you traditionally might see asking for funding. We have launched our inaugural fundraising campaign, so a $10 million Caring North campaign. And this was just shared to our board of directors last night, so it's very recent news, but we've raised over $7 million to date, which is incredible. Next slide, please. So these are our priority areas: Inuit children and youth, community health and well-being, education and learning, arts and culture, and community identified opportunities. So the way we do this, we have a few different instruments, but we do our granting through consensus-based grants, and I have a slide a bit later that talks about this. But essentially, consensus-based granting is rooted in traditional Inuit knowledge of sharing and coming together on collective decision-making. So we'll share an expression of interest to our community. Folks can fill out a short form to express their interest. We ask for their contact information, a little bit about the project or initiative they want to bring forward, and what budget they're looking for. And rather than us reviewing the applications, once that cohort is determined, all of the granting is done by the participants themselves. So many of you are probably familiar with the term participatory granting, very same approach, but again, attuned for Nunavut. And so in this process, the organizations collectively come, decide what consensus means to them and how they'll know when they've made a decision. They decide on the projects that will be funded, and they help each other with their projects. It's this beautiful exchange of peer learning, and they decide on the funding allocations. So this process is really rooted in trust, and trusting that our organizations and our communities know best. Similarly, with our donors and our partners, we're trying to build trust-based relationships with them. We also have a community nominated award that will be launching shortly. And this is an award we'll give once annually that's determined by our board of directors to recognize an organization for meeting community needs in the past year. And that's where community identified opportunities fits in. But otherwise, we do different cohorts for consensus-based granting around the top 4 priority areas. Next slide, please. So Inuktitut philanthropy. This is a term that has been developed by Annauma and our board of directors. It really is centered in the fact that our work is grounded in caring for each other, caring for Inuit culture and language, and wanting to engage with donors and partners who listen deeply, are open to new insights, and see this partnership as an opportunity to learn and unlearn. It's really grounded in sharing, which is the essence of what we're calling Inuktitut philanthropy. Sharing has always existed in Inuit society, and it's really about paying attention and being connected to one another and knowing what others need. And so Annauma exists to enable access to opportunity, not necessarily through giving, but through this emphasis on sharing. Next slide, please. And so this is some of the the value proposition. This slide I should have edited more. It's very focused on corporate philanthropy, which isn't always the case. But I think what I said before really aligns, where we're inviting our donors to learn alongside us and partner with us and to invest in community-led opportunities. Next slide, please. And again, here you see that word partnership. So really trying to create an equal playing field with our donors. I reflected to Lisa the other day when we were prepping for this, that it's so different than fundraising for other organizations where I've worked for, where there's this power hierarchy between donors and you're groveling to them, you're trying to meet their needs, they're telling you what's important, but it's really this, equal partnership. And we recognize that they benefit a lot from partnering with us. And I encourage all of you to, see the strength in your community foundation and the work you're doing. And that while we need external funds, there's so much value that donors and funders and governments get from partnering with community foundations. Next slide, please. So this is just our approach to fundraising. 3 C's there. I think it's really centered around caring, connection, and community. We don't have multiple target audiences. So we started working with a local comms firm to help with social media a while ago. And they were asking about, well, who's your target audience for social media? And I said, it's our community first and foremost. So we work to have one message that is centered in our community, but also works for our donors and other stakeholders. So really about the primacy of our community first. Next slide, please. This is our funding model. So when our board, in 2019, when our board of directors was learning about community foundations, there was folks from Community Foundations Canada who came up to give a workshop to them on, what does a community foundation look like? And it was over 2 days. And after day 1, they all said to each other, well, that's not going to work here. That's not going to work for Nunavut. And this was this traditional model of an endowment and donor advised funds. And the reality is that there's needs that need to be met now. We can't wait to build up this big endowment fund and then be granting, 3.5% to 5% of that. We need to make an impact sooner. And they recognized it would be really hard to gain the respect of our community if we were just taking time to build this endowment fund. Additionally, to really be community-led and to walk the walk of supporting community-led initiatives, we can't have donors telling us what to do. So we've developed this, what we call our 40-40-20 funding model. And nearly all of our donors have bought into it, which is amazing. And so 40% is directed to community granting to be spent over 3 years. And so those align with the priority areas I shared before. 40% go into long-term investments and for a minimum of 10 years. And the idea is that after that 10-year mark, those funds will be returned to community granting. So we continually have this model of reinvesting into community. And then 20% is for sector development. So a big part of our mandate is to strengthen the nonprofit and charitable sector in Nunavut. We do allow donors to identify a priority area within the 40% for community granting, but those are our priority areas. And we can use sector development towards supporting operations, but to date, we've been successful in raising funds from the government of Nunavut and private foundations specific to operations. Next slide, please. And then I just included a couple of slides on consensus granting. And I shared this before, but it really is focused on reducing administration, increasing self-determination, and at the root of it is this idea of trust-based philanthropy. I see there's a note about a policy. I'm assuming that was about a policy on the allocation model. Not yet. So we are working on all of our policies. I do have some language that we've used in agreements that I can share. And when I expect to have that policy done by September, and I'm happy to share it with anyone. Next slide, please. And then the benefits. So it reduces the administrative burden on organizations in the 2 cohorts that we've run so far. We've heard how fun this is, how much better it is than sitting at your computer and trying to write an application, trying to make it appeal to what a donor wants. There's also this, what's not on here, but this incredible like peer learning exchange. So not only are they making decisions on the funding allocations together, the cohorts come together to report on their projects. So on the last day of the granting session, they decide themselves how they want to measure and evaluate their projects. We don't tell them what to do. And then they have an opportunity to reconvene at a later date, and they come together and share with each other what happened. And it's really exciting just to see how much they learn from interacting and doing this kind of through a peer mindset. I always think that, you know, reporting is great, but often funders, one person might read it, maybe 2, and then it goes into a file. So, you know, with our focus on strengthening the sector by convening these groups in person, to talk about their work, to talk about their challenges, what went well, we can advance that a lot. And that's all I have. Thank you.
That's amazing to hear just these 2 examples and you know, you're both just trying to get off the ground, and it's kind of a day by day figuring out where you should be going, and yet with such interesting examples and varied examples. I'd love to open it up for questions a little bit, as much as you would like to, and then we're technically here until half the hour. If we have time, it'd be great to get you into breakout sessions too, so that you can just talk to each other about what you've heard. So one of the questions about consensus grant making from Karl is like, how often you do this? Is it once a year that you do the consensus grant making? Or do you have a couple different, do you do it per area, like youth versus another area? How do you?
Yeah, so again, this might change because we're learning and adapting as we go. But we're doing our learning and education every year. And I think it's important to share that this doesn't just mean supporting academic learning, but it also supports cultural learning, whether that's on the land programs, or arts or language revitalization. And then our other priority areas, we have 2 a year. And so the idea is to cycle through those until so over 2 years, we'll hit every priority area. And then we do our community nominated award once per year. And so I do have, we recently have hired a community engagement lead, Candace, who's on the chat here, to help with our granting, because this is well, it takes the burden off of grantees. There's quite a bit of administrative work and planning on our end.
Good. Thank you. There's a question from Lori here. Do either of you actually have a business plan that is written out as far as like your different paths of income to your whole structure, or are you still working on that?
I would say no, I don't have one. This was actually probably my first attempt to even kind of codify all those thoughts, but I'm
Right.
happy to follow up and put something together. Our foundation, as I mentioned, we're working with this marketing firm, and part of that is preparing some goals and some strategic planning. And so that is something I will be working on as part of that process. Absolutely.
Yeah. Danielle?
We do have a business plan, and I'm happy to share it. I also want to preface that it was developed specifically for the government of Nunavut. We have funding through economic development and trade. So it's written very, very differently than anything else we do. It's very business economic lens. And I would not share this publicly with our community or donors. So I'm happy to share some elements of that talk about our funding model a bit more.
Thanks for that.
And we can follow up on that, on these things, Karl and Daniela, when we're done. Eduardo, your hand is raised.
So thank you so much, both presenters, for the insights. I wanted to ask you, Danielle, a little more about the participatory grant-making process, decision-making criteria. What do you suggest? What do you provide to your, can I imagine you have a group of curators? How do you think about these decision makers? How do you invite them in? How do you prepare them? Do you ever dismiss them? Are they coming in temporarily and just say, we do some of this here in one of our funds in Brumadinho, and it's wonderful, but it's really hard. So I'd love to hear how you do it.
Yeah, thank you. And so our first cohort that we piloted this model, we invited organizations to participate. So it was a more closed approach, and they were wearing the role of both grantees and participants, and acting as advisors to Annauma. Recently, we did an open call for expressions of interest. We partnered with Community Foundations Canada on a fund for gender equality. And we had the organizations fill out an expression of interest form that shared their project idea. This was specific for gender equality. So we asked, how does your initiative advance gender equality? We asked, how does your initiative involve the community you serve? So trying to get a sense of, is it community led? And we also asked if your organization or project has Inuit leadership, because that's also a priority for Annauma. And then we took those, and we have a granting advisory council, which has one board member and then is comprised of community members who reviewed the EOIs, and we determined the cohort from there. We also, the organizations that weren't selected, we offered an opportunity to have a meeting to share feedback. So trying to be really transparent with them so they can understand, here's maybe why they didn't get selected and what they could do next time. And I think we spend a fair bit of time on the first day of really grounding the group in this purpose, that we're all here for a common purpose. And so we define that based on the priority area. So our upcoming one will be arts and culture, and really recognizing that we're all here because we all support arts and culture for Nunavut. And you start to see this kind of shift where they go from, I'm just focusing on applying for a grant and what's best for my organization, and to, we're here, like, we get to decide. I'm not just applying for a piece of the pie, but we get to decide where this money is going. And they really care about it and they want it to have the most impact. So it's kind of the shift from an individualistic to a collective mindset. We did have in this recent cohort a situation where our participant didn't buy into that mindset. When all other organizations were saying, we can take, we can reduce the amount of funding we're asking for or reduce our project scope. This other organization said, I should have asked for more money. So that's something that we need to figure out of, not in our due diligence, not just looking about the organizations and the projects, but also maybe having a conversation with the person who's participating. We recently created a board expectation document that kind of goes beyond their fiduciary and legal responsibilities, but how we want them to show up and those expectations. And we're thinking of having a participant expectation document that everyone signs off to, and we kind of outline the values that we want to uphold through this process. So we're learning. We don't have it perfectly figured out, but we're trying to make it work.
Good. Any other questions for the presenters?
Yes, Lisa, I would like to talk, if possible.
Yes.
Sure, thank you. Danielle and Carl, thank you very much for setting up these presentations for us. I do help to help create community foundations in Latin America, and I feel that your cases are very similar to what happens in Latin America, where there are very small communities, and also there's a lot of needs, and we cannot wait to have endowed money. Even that there is not a structure to endow money that is easy to do in our countries. It's a complex system. So I thank you very much for your presentations. I'm just willing to have it in my hands so I can use it and take some more information from your scopes and things you said. It both presented very nice things. Your chart card that you say we were this and this, and now we're focusing on this, helps me very much for when I will give talks. And Danielle, your 40-40-20, I saw it marvelous. So if you have any material about that, I would love to have more information of both. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Agustin. Lori, thank you. Thank you for your comment. These are monthly meetings and that's a different topic each month. And so you will be on our mailing list. We'll send that out at the beginning of each month and you can register to be on here. But this is really meant to be a space for precisely this, sharing between foundations, getting a chance to meet people across countries. Our contexts are different, but we're working on a lot of the same global issues and this idea of building civil society, right? Building work. So you're really, really welcome, any of your colleagues, to this space.
Lisa, I'm in a different time zone ordinarily. I just happen to be taking care of my mom right now, and she's in Florida, so I'm on Eastern Standard Time. But
Good.
normally we're in the Northern Mariana Islands, and so it's like 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning there now.
Yeah.
So it's is this the typical time frame, or is there a time when maybe it's at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time? Because that would then like be 6 or 7 a.m. in Saipan, and that would be something. And if it wasn't, maybe not all the time, but once in a while, that would be helpful to shift the time of the meetings if there's amenability to that. Or I
Yeah.
can maybe try to create something else with you.
Right, yeah, and we're always open to conversation around that. We're within the Americas, the mainland continent, it's also like 7 different time zones. So that's been one of our biggest challenges is to get a space where the majority of people would be able to attend. And in any case, this is when we have these calls, is always at this time. You can always register and get the information after the fact, the recording. But I know it's also very rich to actually be right there. So I'm happy to think more about that and talk more about that with
Thank you
you.
kindly.
Yes, of course. Let's get you guys into breakout rooms so that you can also share with each other just some of your own strategies or further questions that you might have. And taking a look, I think we'll be able to mix up the group well enough across countries. So let me take a quick look. First, I'll stop the recording.